Okay, we are recording. So welcome to Get a Jump on the School Year, your guide to successful special education. Today, we are going to go over terminology for special education, setting up for success in the school, and navigating advocacy as a parent or caregiver. So let's talk about us. I am going to introduce to you my co-presenter here, Amy Wall, and she's a colleague of mine. And Amy, I'm going to hand it over to you, and so you can share a little bit about yourself.
All right. So I am a special education advocate. I have been doing this for about 15 years. Prior to that, I taught for Fairfax County Public Schools as a special education teacher for preschoolers with special needs. I have a degree in communication sciences and disorders, as well as early childhood special education master's. And my minor and my undergrad degree was also K through 12. So I ran the gamut on all of the special ed ages. I kind of specialize for us in the behavior areas, as well as doing 504 plans, functional behavior assessments, behavior intervention plans, as well as I'm fairly strongly trained in autism as well.
Great, and I am Samantha Thomas. I am a licensed and certified speech language pathologist, as well as an educational advocate. I have experience in outpatient, inpatient, and school settings. School settings, preschool through middle school is what I have worked with. I do have a strong background working with children with language and learning disorders, experience with AAC, augmentative alternative communication, and I'm a mom of 3. And I just started working alongside Amy last year, well, 2 years, almost 2 years ago now, but officially last year to support families who need some advocacy and consulting. Okay, so we want to hear a little bit about who you guys are today. I'm going to launch a poll here, and I'm just curious, what is your relationship with special education? If you guys complete that poll and then drop in the chat, why are you here today? What made you join this webinar? And then Amy, I'm just going to make sure I have a chat screen open. Can you see that on your end? What I'm sharing?
No.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, great. Okay, so it looks like we have a good portion of our participants are caregivers or parents of a child that has an IEP or 504 plan already. We have some that are pursuing special education for their child, and then a few professionals in special education joining us. So welcome. We're excited to share with you all. Okay, so to get started this morning, we are going to review some terminology, and Amy and I discussed adding this in because we work alongside of a lot of parents and a lot of caregivers, and we know that special education terminology is its own language. But it is super important to know what terminology to use, especially when you're communicating with your teams. And Amy, what have you found is most important about using the right terminology when talking with the schools?
So I have found that when you are asking for things, they often don't understand what you want, and they will give you something completely different, or they will not engage with you the way that you're wanting them to, because they're not understanding what you need. If you use the correct terminology, then you will be able to get results a lot faster. So it's very important to be able to ask for specifically what you need, instead of giving them a general information about what you want.
Yes, I completely agree. So if you're a participant on here today, drop a 1 in the chat if you are super proficient with special education terminology, and drop a 2 in the chat if you are somebody that is so confused by the terms and it's another language. Okay, so Amy's going to get us started with the first part, and that is our process to special education.
So there is a process that's provided. Oops, my computer's gone crazy. Hold on. So there is a process that is developed by the federal law under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that is kind of what this this little picture here kind of describes. And it gives you a specific pathway for what is going to happen. So you're going to start off by asking for the team to come together to evaluate whether your child needs additional help or not. And some counties are going to do that through optional meetings at the beginning, where they're going to just come and they're going to talk about, what does your child need? What are you concerned about in the classroom? Or if the school team has come to you and said, we think that your child needs some additional help, then they would be presenting that information to you. These optional meetings don't always happen. Sometimes we jump straight into talking about evaluations. But the optional meetings are good information to come up with different things that the school has done for your child already. We want to talk about going over and beyond what a teacher would do for a typical child. That might look like that teacher has sat with your child one-on-one some, or in a very small group, to help provide additional instruction. It might look like them moving your child closer to them so that there's more instruction and they're able to give them more attention during group instruction. It might look like them printing off worksheets rather than having them do things in the classroom on the computers. It's just a way for them to try to engage your child in a different way. Many very good teachers use these strategies to help kids who maybe aren't kids on the special needs spectrum, but they just need a little extra help. So the team is going to come forward and talk about what they've done for your child over and beyond what they would do for a typical child. And then they're going to talk about, is that working? Is that providing your child with the extra help that he or she needs in order to be successful in the classroom? And so if the answer is yes, we really think that what we're doing in the classroom is working, then we're going to continue to do that. Some counties, particularly Prince William County, will actually sit down and write a document called an intervention document that actually lists out exactly what they're doing in the classroom that is helping your child. And this document can go from teacher to teacher as that child grows. It can be updated every year or even during the year as it needs to be. And it's a great way to track what's going on in the classroom for the child and be able to list out so that everyone's on the same page. We always encourage parents to, even if the county doesn't offer that, to go ahead and ask for something like that so that everybody's on the same page about what is expected to be provided for the child, as well as what your expectations for your child are. And then if the answer to we've done over and beyond what is expected for a child in the classroom, if the answer is they're still struggling, then we will often go into an evaluation where you would sign off permission for your child to be tested by the school team. And Sam's going to lead us through a little bit of what that looks like.
Okay, so let's talk about evaluation and eligibility. So intervention is an optional meeting in that first part prior to eligibility for either an IEP or a 504 plan. So if you are somebody that's never seen an intervention document and you already have, your child already has an IEP or a 504, probably not something you need to be concerned about. If you are somebody that is just getting started with the special education process, that might be something, particularly if you are in Prince William County, would be something to look at. This is also often known as RTI, response to intervention, and anything data taken on that can be utilized to determine if an evaluation is warranted. I do realize we may have people here not from Virginia. We're going to be speaking specifically to Virginia when it comes to processes, but they're not vastly different across states. It just might have a little bit difference in timeline. So evaluation and eligibility. What is eligibility? Eligibility is the process of determining whether your child is a child with a disability. And in order to receive special education services via an IEP or accommodations through a 504 plan, the schools must determine if your child is a disability under IDEA and whether there is an educational need for an IEP or 504 plan in order for your child to receive free and appropriate public education. So it's super important to note that a disability in the schools might be different from a medical diagnosis of a disability, and that those pieces of information are considered, but a student that has a medical diagnosis of something may not always qualify as a child with a disability in the school. It all comes down to their educational need and the educational impact. So just a little side note there. And let's talk about what is needed for eligibility. A referral for evaluation needs to be completed to get the necessary assessments and evaluations and review relevant data or information in order to help the whole team determine if a student qualifies as a student with special education needs under IDEA or maybe requires a 504 plan. Relevant assessments are specific to the suspected disability, but often include looking at cognitive processing, academic achievement, social, emotional, and behavioral skills, communication, fine motor, gross motor skills, vision, and hearing, just to name a few. Now, I do want to note that a child must be found eligible, again, at least every 3 years for both a 504 and an IEP. And I think that it's important to note that this eligibility evaluation can happen sooner, but at minimum, it has to happen every 3 years. So we're going to go ahead and move on now to the 504 plan versus an IEP.
Okay, so a 504 plan is a legal plan under the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1957. So this civil rights law is not an educational law. So you can actually use this law outside of the educational arena to get things in place for someone as well. But right now we're talking about it for the educational piece of it. It covers all disabilities that substantially limit one or more basic life activity. So this could mean that your child can learn appropriately, but say they are confined to a wheelchair. So our 504 might look like ways to support them during physical activity, during PE or moving around the building, those sorts of things. It might also be related to a child who has ADHD, who is thriving fairly well in the classroom as far as his academics are concerned, but he just needs some additional accommodations such as a private place to test, a smaller group to test in, maybe untimed tests, maybe extra breaks, things like that, that kind of help him to refocus himself during the school day. So it encompasses all disabilities, not just ones that limit learning. So a special education teacher is not required to follow a student or do anything special for a student. These accommodations often are general education specific. They do not include special education direct services, like speech therapy, occupational therapy. There are no goals written to achieve. This is simply just accommodating the environment so that your child can do what other students can do. It kind of evens the playing field, so to speak. And the accommodations are made specific for each child. Then we've got the IEP, and this is a legal plan under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and IEP stands for Individual Education Plan. So we are going to be writing a plan that's specific to your child. This document is developed in order to take a child who is struggling and bring them up to where they should be. So we're filling in a gap by doing an IEP. We want to make goals for how we're going to do that. It can also encompass the same kind of accommodations that a 504 plan talks about. So oftentimes teams will not write an IEP and a 504 because the 504 can be encompassed inside the IEP. And then we also then give direct services from special education teachers or speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists. Counselors can be involved in an IEP, those sorts of things, so that the child can make up any area within their learning that needs to be made up in the cognitive, motor, social areas, as well as adaptive areas such as, attention, being able to toilet and wash hands and do routines that are part of daily living that are involved in the school setting.
The next piece of terminology we're going to go over is related services, and related services help children with disabilities benefit from their special education by providing extra help and support in their areas of need. So related services may include, but are not limited to, speech language pathology and audiology services. So speech therapy might be added as a related service, interpreting services, psychological services. So that includes other pieces of counseling and other pieces like that, physical therapy and occupational therapy, PT and OT, recreational therapy, and then there's a whole list of them. And I'm going to be honest, the most common ones tend to be at the top, but there is definitely other pieces that can be added to related services. And again, just something to be aware of, because that might be something extra down at the bottom of the IEP that you want to be aware can be added or may be there already. Now let's talk about progress reports, because the next part of our presentation, we're going to go into how you can set up a successful school year, and progress reports are super important for setting up a successful school year, because it is really the report of the data you need in order to get specific information about your child's progress towards their individualized IEP goals and objectives. Now, this progress report is specific to an IEP. Now, for anybody that is watching that has a 504 plan, or their child has a 504 plan, those progress reports, you may use something like the report cards, or maybe teacher conferencing and things like that to utilize that data. But specific to IEPs, you get an official IEP progress report, and it should be reported for each goal area. Teachers and related services may provide the data, and it's often sent out at the end of each report card period, but it may be more often. And that's, at least in Virginia, what we have here, and I suspect is similar elsewhere. And then just some additional supports to be aware of. Extended school year, and this is specialized instruction or related services that are part of a child's IEP. This is not summer school, so it's very important to differentiate. Extended school year is specific to the child's IEP goals, and it helps maintain skills and not lose progress made towards a goal, and may be provided during summer, during breaks, or before and after school if they're not making enough progress. COVID recovery is a fairly new additional support. When COVID-19 hit, the state came together to develop a way to make sure that we are closing those gaps on information or content that our children may have missed. Now, COVID recovery is not specific to a child with a disability either. So if you have children without disabilities and you feel like they may have been impacted by COVID, you might be able to look up COVID recovery and work with your school to see what they can provide. But essentially, it is services that may be provided to support skills that were impacted by LEA closures. So your local education agency closed during COVID. So because of that closure outside of the normal school year, you might be entitled to some services or supports. And then finally, again, compensatory services is another additional support. This is not available to everybody, but it is services to remedy any educational or other deficits that result from the student with a disability not receiving evaluations or services which they were entitled to. So I know specifically in our area of Northern Virginia, due to many reasons, including lack of resources, I've heard of various compensatory service letters going out. And so if you are somebody that has received that, note that that is very different than and it doesn't go on your IEP. Those minutes are not going to be serviced through an IEP. They're going to be serviced through a separate channel. Okay. So before we move on, I want to just make sure participants give me a little wave or a thumbs up in the chat if you're still following us. Make sure to drop any questions you have on that section on terminology in the Q&A. And we are going to get started to how you can get a jump start on the school year and help your child be successful. Here is what we're going to go over today. Review, evaluate, share, set. So I'm going to get started. Amy, do you want to start with this one or you want me to start with this one?
I can go.
Okay.
So you're going to take the document that you have developed with your school team, whether it's a 504 plan or the IEP, and you're going to just look through it. As you guys, many of you know, the documents can be extremely long, especially the IEP. 504s tend to be much shorter, but you want to check out the present levels of functioning. That area may be titled something different depending on what county you're in, but it's basically the area of the document where the school team is listing out what your child, when it was written, was able to do and was not able to do, what areas of concern the team had, and where they are working to make up the progress in education, or on the 504, what areas they are targeting within the classroom to help your child be on an even playing field with other children. So you want to review that area to make sure that that information is still relevant to your child. Oftentimes, because these documents are reviewed and rewritten every year, if it was last September that this document was written, there may have been a lot of growth over the last year or even over the summer that the team needs to know about. So if it's very vastly different, you might want to just write up a little description of how you feel your child has developed, whether it is they've gotten worse in some areas and you feel those areas are things that need to be targeted this year, or whether there's been great growth in certain areas and you want that teacher to really know that they're doing much better in a specific area. If there's a huge amount of growth or a huge amount of decrease in their abilities, you need to call a meeting to review the document and set the child up for success. But if you feel like it's pretty good and it's right on, then you can leave the document alone. You can add a few little tidbits about growth in a Word document that you can give to the teachers. For 504s, you also want to go through those accommodations. You want to look back to last year, what accommodations worked and what didn't. What do you feel your child may need going forward that you need to communicate with the teacher? And again, write that information down for them. With the IEP, you want to look at the goals, the areas that the team has put forth to make sure that they're still appropriate. There's still things that you feel your child needs to be working on. You want to compare that to those progress reports that Sam just talked about. Last year, how much progress was your child making in those areas? And if they weren't making good progress in those areas, you need to communicate with the team. What should we be doing? Do we need to re-look at the goals to change them, to better modify them to what the child needs? Or do you need to scratch the goal altogether and write something new? If they're making really good progress, then you want to think about, did they make even more progress over the summer? Do I need to communicate any progress that was made over the summer to the team? You want to look at the services. These services are really important. You want to identify who is going to be giving those services to your child. So reach out to the school. If you don't know who your child's case manager is, that is really important that you know who that person is. That's the person you're going to communicate with all year about your child. So you want to know who your case manager is. You want to know which special education teachers are going to be providing different services. If you've got goals for math and reading, especially in middle and high, you may have 2 different special education teachers delivering those services. And then you want to know the names and contact information for any therapists that are working with your child, the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, the counselor. If there is a nurse involved, you need to know that information so that you can get a hold of those people and so that you can introduce yourself and communicate with them. And then lastly, you want to go back through those accommodations, just like from a 504, to make sure that those accommodations that are listed out, you still feel are appropriate for your child.
Awesome. So a lot of these things that Amy talked about are very tied into the next step. So the review part is where you're going to get started. Then, as Amy alluded to, you're going to evaluate whether the plans that you have, the 504 plan or the IEP, are effective. You know, have your child's accommodations improved their educational performance, or have the grades and or progress indicated success. So evaluating that is a super important component, especially as a parent or a caregiver, because you are ultimately going to be the one advocating for your child to make sure they get what they need. And then, as Amy talked about, are they making gains, or do you need to talk to the school about additional supports or services or changes to the goals, accommodations, minutes, etc. And then I know that we jumped into sharing this information. I think it's super important to know that, especially at the beginning of the school year, our staff does not always have access to their students right away, or they might just be getting familiarized with these documents. And so it is very helpful if you let your team know, hey, my child has an IEP, my child has a 504, and here's some ways that we have kind of developed found are helpful with sharing with your teachers or any providers that work with your child. Create or update an All About Me book, which is more for the younger school age kids, or a cover page, one single cover page for your older kids. And this is really not meant to be a novel. It's meant to be a snapshot about the unique needs of your child and effective strategies for your child. Don't put every single thing in there. Pick your top 3 things or top 5 things that are most important that the teacher needs to know about your child. Explain why these things are essential to your child's success. And then again, just include a brief description about how changes in the school routine, the classroom, or the teacher affected your child last year, if they did. And then provide a teacher with a copy of either this All About Me book or a cover page. We have several examples of those. So if you're looking for examples, you can certainly Google it, or you can email us and we're happy to share. But make sure you provide the teacher with a copy of this. And then at the bottom, we're going to say, as well as a copy of the IEP or 504 plan. It just gives them a quick snapshot and puts your child at the top of their pile for reviewing. Next, you want to also craft a back to school email. I know there's several counties that have already gone back to school. Prince William County is going back to school next week, but you can still draft that email. We are still at the beginning of the school year. And this is an email to introduce yourself to your child's teacher. It gives a little bit more of a personal touch, shows them that you are involved and wanting to collaborate and partner with them to make it a successful year. And then if you have the opportunity, meet with your child's teacher or teachers and service providers. This might be by phone or in person. I know we've had a lot of orientations and back to school days recently here. And I think that this is super important for you guys to attend if you're able to. And if not, see if you can schedule a special time over the phone to just introduce yourself and your child. And then, like I said, definitely share the copy of the IEP or 504 plan. Don't assume that your teachers have access to the IEP or 504 or that they review thoroughly before your child starts school, because it doesn't always happen. It's part of the reality of getting school started.
So Sam, I want to jump in. Someone shared that it's a struggle trying to determine what accommodations help in middle and high school. I completely agree with you. That is a huge, it's much easier in elementary school for whatever reason, because in middle and high, you've got multiple teachers, you've got some teachers who are, engaging in different ways with kids. And so you might have a history teacher that your child really does well with, the science teacher they're just not doing well with at all because the presentation is different. And so that can be a really big challenge at that level. I will say that it's trial and error. Go in. I always tell parents that you want your child to be as successful as they can be and be as much like typical kids as possible. But at the same time, you want to offer them as many helps that that they need. So it's often better to load the 504 or the IEP with accommodations that you feel that they can benefit from. And if you see they're not using them, then the team can take them off later. Or you can also ask a teacher, could you try this and see if it works? And then if it works for that particular teacher, then we can always add it to the document at another meeting later. And so it can be trial and error. It's about communication between your child and the child's teachers and what best works. And it may not be that it works well in one class, but it does in another. And so it's okay for you to be creative in how you approach that. And then as you're learning your child too, I know we've got a foster mom in the group here today, and that is awesome. I will tell you, I am an adoptive mom. I have 2 children who are adopted from Ukraine, and I also work with the foster system here in the United States. And so thank you for joining us. And that it makes it especially hard when you've got a new kiddo, that there are things that needs to be done. You're trying to learn as fast as you can learn. Again, trial and error. Try it, see if it works. And if it doesn't, that's okay. And if it does, then perfect. We can put it in a document. We can put it in the document and try it, or we can try it and then put it in the document. It doesn't matter which order we do that in, but just kind of try it and see what you can do. And I know that, someone just said that kids don't always want to seem different or have attention drawn to them. I have the same problem. I have a high school student on the spectrum who has dyslexia, and he does not want to pull out of the classroom and take a test by himself. He doesn't want to look different. He wants to stay in there and he wants to be with the other kids. He needs that test read to him. And so what we've done with his teacher is he sits in the class and he takes the test just like the other kids. He hands it in just like the other kids. And then he attends office hours after school when nobody knows he's there. And that teacher reads that test back to him a second time and allows him to change the answers if he feels he needs to. And so those are the kinds of creative things that sometimes you can do with teachers.
Yeah, and I think to everybody's point, no kids want to stand out, but I think we'd be surprised at how many children actually do receive accommodations. And honestly, it's called differentiated instruction. So our schools are already doing that. They have different reading groups where different kids of different levels are in a reading group together, particularly in the younger ages. And there's people moving in and out of the classroom all the time. So I think that really demystifying that with your child and talking to them about the importance of their accommodations and their goals, especially as they get older, is important to do as well. And that kind of goes back to sharing, involving your child and sharing about their needs with their kids, especially with their teachers, especially as they move into middle school and high school. Okay, so our final piece to getting set up in a jumpstart on a successful school year is setting a positive tone. For anybody that has worked with me, and as Amy knows, I think it is super important to collaborate and set a positive tone as much as possible with your school team. Your child will likely be in that school, particularly elementary, for quite a while, and even middle school and high school. You know, it's usually 3 to 4 to 5 years, and you have to work with those people and don't want to have that awkwardness if something goes down that's negative. So to the best of your ability, set that positive tone by attending that open house, when meeting with your child's teachers. Establish a communication system with your child's teacher or providers and discuss how you prefer communication and updates. I always say, put this part in writing. If you can send an email about what communication system you prefer and how often you would like to have communication, that is helpful, obviously within reason. And then discuss this new routine with your child. You know, I hear we have some children going to high school, and discussing those accommodations and how that might look different in high school. Or if you have a child who has autism, they may be transitioning to a new classroom, and that can be a really rough transition. So talk your child through that new routine. If they have trouble adjusting to changes or routine and environment, you may want to consider social stories or books or other tools to help them transition to school. And then if you have any unresolved concerns or issues, I highly encourage you to get ahead of those concerns and issues before they snowball out of control. Make sure to address your concerns at an IEP meeting, put your parent concerns in writing, and discuss solutions to the problems before your child has similar problems this year. So again, each year is a new team, new teacher, and for most students, that is. And I think that it's important to share those concerns from the past to make sure that they are aware and can be given an opportunity to collaborate and fix those changes before anything negative goes down. Do you have anything to add to that, Amy?
No, I just second what you said about getting ahead of the concerns. You know, more often than not, Sam and I end up in situations where parents haven't communicated concerns with the school, and it's now blown up into this gigantic problem, and it's heated and it's hard. And so it's much better if you'll go in and say, these are some concerns that I have. What are some ideas that you have to help me with these concerns? And just remember that sometimes our concerns as parents can filter into a child's emotional feelings about school. So always, even if you're concerned, try your best to stay as positive for your child, that this teacher is going to be great this year. And, you know, we're going to work together and those sorts of things. So that it truly does help for your child.
Yep. Okay, so before we move on to the next section, I want to know how many of you are frantically taking notes right now. Drop a 1 if you're frantically taking notes right now, a 2 if you're just kind of watching. Because I want to let you guys know we are actually going to give you this, and I should have said this before you all were all frantically taking notes, a checklist with all these pieces for you guys to go through. And we'll just send that out at the end of the webinar. Miss Jan Russell will send it out to anybody who's watching this webinar through the ARC, and we'll make sure that you guys get that. So, and then I'm curious, how many of you are already doing these back to school pieces? Drop a 3 in the chat if you're already doing them. Drop a 4 in the chat if you have not even started. I will tell you, I'm a 4 with all this right now. My kids start school next week, and I need to get on the ball. But okay, So I love getting some feedback. Looks like some people are taking screenshots. Awesome. Okay. Some people are already doing this, meeting with some teachers. Okay, good. And I had a lot of people frantically taking notes. So don't worry, it's good for your brain. You're going to remember it easier than with that multisensory input.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to pass the ball to Amy about navigating advocacy and things to remember as your student's advocate.
So I cannot emphasize this enough, is that you as the parent are an equal member of the IEP team. I can't tell you how many parents have come to me and said, well, the school said I have to. The school can't say you have to. You are an equal member of that team. You get a say. You get to add to their current levels of performance. You get to talk about what their needs are in your eyes, and you get to help develop those goals and objectives. You get to help develop those accommodations and what you feel is best. You know your child best. And so get in there and advocate for your child. Tell them what you feel and tell them what you think about them. Do it respectfully, but you are an equal member of the team, and you are the official decider on the information that is put into an IEP. A school can propose the IEP to you the way that they see fit. However, you are the one who has to sign permission for either a 504 or a IEP to be put into place. So please just remember that you are always an equal member of the team. It should never be school team versus parent team. It should always be a collaborative thing in order for the best interest of the child. You can call an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting at any time during the school year. If you have concerns, you can call a meeting. If you feel like goals are not being met, you can call a meeting. Anytime you feel you need one. The biggest thing I will say is if you get progress reports that say goals are mastered, that is awesome. It doesn't mean that it's over. You need to call a meeting and say, this is great. I am so proud of my child. I'm so thankful to you all for helping my child get to a mastery point. But what's the next step? What new goal should we put in place in order to help my child continue with his or her growth? It is very common for teachers to master out a goal and be like, phew, we're done. All right. And forget to come back to the table and write a new goal. So always stay on top of that. And then always be proactive instead of reactive. Just making sure that you are being communicative with the teachers and just moving forward and making sure that things are going well. And then the biggest thing that we find is if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. If a teacher says to you, oh, we're going to do 20 minutes of extra reading a day to help him catch up. If that's not in writing, you can't hold her to it. If it's not in writing and it doesn't get done, there's no way to go back and fix it. So we need all of that information to be in writing. If they're going to do it, make them put it in writing somewhere so that it happens and you can hold them to it. And then our last thing is that you don't have to do this alone. The school team, I can't tell you how many parents, and even as a parent of special needs children myself, I'm an advocate. I do this for a living, and I can't tell you how overwhelming it is to walk into a room all by myself with a panel of specialists who oftentimes I work with and have to sit down and talk about my own child. It's overwhelming. You're emotionally tied to your child. It is an emotional process for you. So take somebody with you. Take a friend, take your mom, although she tends to be kind of emotional as well, but take your husband. Husbands tend to be really strong in this area. Even though they are emotionally tied, they think different than we do. Or hire an advocate. There are many of us that would be happy to go with you and walk the process to help you understand and decode the language, to help you know how to ask for what you're asking for, to help come up with more creative ways. Sometimes it's not that teachers don't want to help, it's just that they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed and overworked, and they sometimes are just trying to keep everything together. And so having another person in the room who kind of knows the way to be able to say, hey, did you think about this? It's not adversarial. It becomes a relief for them. I can't tell you how many teachers have walked up to me after meetings and said, you said things I couldn't say, or I had never even thought of it from that direction. Thank you for being here. It just takes a team. And so build a team of your own to bring in with you to help you think through what needs to happen throughout the process.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, we wanted to share, and again, we are going to have these resources available to share with you with a few others, but some of our favorite resources are the book From Emotions to Advocacy by Peter Wright and Pam Wright. And this, if you are a parent, if you are somebody and a caregiver, you are emotionally invested in this book, really helps you give you resources on how to objectively approach the situation, including some templates and ideas on how to communicate. The ARC, Greater Prince William, is the one who is actually hosting this webinar today, so thank you. But we also have the ARC Northern Virginia, and if you are in another area of Virginia or the country, the ARC is an organization all over the country that supports people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Virginia Department of Education, there are tons of resources on there that both parents and educators can use. Yeah, educators, there's even sample IEP goals on there. So if you are somebody watching that, or parents, if you're looking for some good IEP goals, there's some on there. There is the State Ombudsman, which is a third-party person that works for the Department of Education, but is able to provide a perspective on compliance and whether your child's IEP is being is within compliance, having that discussion with them. And that is free, at least in Virginia, to set up just a conversation with them and get some additional resources. And then parent resource centers, there's several, there should be one pretty much in each county. I know at least the big counties in Virginia have their own that are full of information about webinars, conferences, ways that you can help your child and support them during the school year. So like I said, we have a sheet that will be going out for people who participated in this webinar as well, with all these resources, plus a few more that we have found very helpful for our clients. Okay, and then I want to make sure that you guys are able to connect with us if you have any additional questions about this webinar. Here's our emails. If you send it to quiveradvocacy@gmail.com, if you don't keep both of them, Amy will get it to me. We have our website, quiveradvocacy.com, and then we are on social media, more so Facebook than Instagram at this point, but we're connecting there. And we wanted to make sure that for anybody participating in this webinar live, we wanted to offer that we're going to, for at least the month of August, maybe a little bit of September 2022, offer a review of IEPs, free review of an IEP, and just give some basic recommendations on whether we think sections of the IEP need to be discussed further with the team or updated. So if that's something that interests you, I'm going to go ahead and drop our website and connect with us in there, as well as if you're interested in future webinars that Amy and I might put on, or just information that we're sharing with our clients. We do have an email list. You can certainly sign up for that email list there. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and share that really quick.
We'd also do a review of 504s as well.
Yes. Oh yeah.
If your child has a 504.
Yes. If you need that too. Yes. Okay. So let me get back to my screen here. I'm going to drop that in the chat for you all. So again, if you decide you want a review of your IEP or 504, make sure to fill out that contact form and just put IEP or 504 review from presentation, and we'll get you from there. So now that's pretty much concluding our webinar. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A right now. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand and we can bring you on. And if you don't, feel free to hop off, and we really appreciate your time today.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions here. Let's see if they put in the chat or the Q&A. Okay. I'm gonna stop recording.